Give a discussion on India's vote for ceasefire in Gaza. The participants are Anil Trigunayath, former diplomat, and Bala Nagendran, D, Akashwani correspondent.
Since October 7, the turmoil continues between Israel and Palestine. Various resolutions adopted and issues have been introspected at the international community, including the United Nations. On this Tuesday, remarked a landmark change as India voted in favor of the adopted resolution calling immediate humanitarian ceasefire. To explain more on the significance and the outcome of the resolution and further developments, we are joined by former Ambassador Anil Trigunayath. Sir, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sir, I would like to start from the India's stand itself first. On October 26th, when there was a resolution, India abstained from voting, and this resolution, India has voted. How do you see the significance of this voting, and how do you reflect this impact would be created on the Israel-India relationship as well as the relationship with the neighbors of Israel with India?
You know, this Israel and Palestine conflict is at least 75 years old. In 1948, the two-state solution was proposed in the United Nations Security Council, one of the first ones, and in which there were a state of Palestine and the state of Israel. That was agreed to, even if we leave the history and the heartburn of the two sides apart. The Israelis agreed to the 1948 to have their state. The Palestinians and the Arab states did not, and they went to war, which thereafter there were three more wars, and finally in all the wars Israel won a large territory from the Palestinians. However, in 1993 we saw that there was a Oslo Accords wherein a state of Palestine was agreed to, two-state solution was once again worked out, and since then we have seen that Israel in 2005 vacated Gaza, which is today's hotspot. And when they left in 2005, there were elections held in Gaza or in Palestine in 2006, in which Hamas, which is a militant organization, does not recognize Israel's right to exist in a way, and want to just establish a Palestinian state on the land that they feel is theirs to begin with. And since then, there have been 4 wars that have happened between them. And each time we have seen the Hamas militant outfit. It has a political outfit which is based out of Doha, Qatar, and there is another one which is based in Gaza, have been continuing to mount the wars, the attacks on Israeli assets, and in turn, Israel normally uses disproportionate force to repel them. Now, on October 7th, when the Hamas suddenly decided to, where the signals that were coming from there was that there would be no further attacks. But you cannot be complacent, which was precisely the case with the Israeli Mossad or the intelligence services, which are said to be the best in the world. And then we saw that these attacks took place on 7th October, whereby about 1,200 to 1,400 people, including women and children, were killed, and about 240 hostages were taken. Now, these hostages also are a very important key to the resolution of this crisis, and they have been now 68 days already passed. The Gaza Strip has been bombed out of shape. More than 65% of the people, the houses, and the infrastructure has been completely decimated. Israel is undergoing its ground offensive. It has tried to somehow negotiate by force, but that has not happened. But it is not going ahead. It has all the time been supported by the United States. So this whole issue was in the two formats you can see. One is the format that is, this was a terror attack on innocent civilians, which the Palestinians and the Arab world says that October 7th can't be the defining day because it has happened to the Palestinians for the last 75 years. So this is the revenge and retribution kind of a thing which is continuing one after the other. But it has not led to Israel for security, nor it has led to a state for the Palestinians. And therefore, the situation today has reached such kind of proportions that it is impossible for the human race or countries to ignore the plight of the ordinary civilians and Palestinians, women and children, who are said to be about 18,000 of them have already been killed in Gaza alone. Now, Gaza is a very small strip of land, actually, just overall 360 square kilometers. So when the first time what these attacks happened, Prime Minister Modi tweeted and sent his condolences and condemnation of the terror attacks which happened on the Israelis and said that India stands with the Israeli people. Then there was a UNGA resolution which came for asking for the ceasefire, but that resolution did not have reference to Hamas's terror act. So the trigger was not mentioned, and therefore India abstained on that resolution. However, thereafter there were two other UNGA resolutions. I am putting it in perspective to get the right approach to the whole thing, how India's position has evolved. Now, India has always supported a viable, a negotiated solution, a sovereign state of Palestine within the ambit of two-state solution. We have always said from before the independence and until now, India's position, there has been no change. And that was clarified by our spokesperson in response to a question. Thereafter, we saw that Al-Ali Hospital was bombed. It was not established who bombed it. There were mutual recriminations that were going on. But Indian Prime Minister Modi called President Abbas and spoke to him, conveyed his condolences, and also expressed sympathies with all the people who have been. And India started supplying humanitarian assistance and aid to that. Now, India's stance in these two cases basically was seen as if there was a shift in favor of Israel. But India was taking a very principled stand, which was indicated after the two more UNGA resolutions that came out. One of the UNGA resolution was on the Israeli settlements. They have been increasing ever since against the international law. So India voted against that. So this is not the first time. The second time there was again the Golan Heights that have been again under the occupation of Israel. And there the Syria and Israel have a problem. And therefore India again voted against that in favor of the Syrian position. Now the situation is that we are seeing on a daily basis, the UN Security Council has been totally paralyzed because of the United States negative vote or the veto. And therefore, this was not moving anywhere. And you have seen last time when the UNGA resolution was put, it was 122 countries, and this time 153 countries of the world who favored immediate ceasefire, and India was one of them. So what India wants? India wants basically that our principal position is that we are against terrorism. Why? Because we have ourselves suffered from terrorism, cross-border terrorism, for last 40 odd years. So it has to be understood in that context that this is an extremely important issue for us. But at the same time, the humanitarian disaster that is unfolding and international humanitarian law that is not being taken into account, and the international community is simply watching and is unable to do anything in that sense. So therefore, India this time has decided to convey that it is time that there should be recourse to immediate ceasefire and humanitarian corridors access to be permitted so that the ordinary civilians who have nowhere to go today, northern Gaza is being bombarded, the southern Gaza is being bombarded, they have been asked to go to the coastline. So I think that today the international community is feeling, although in my view much later than it should have been done before, but India's position has been consistent and principled position both in the cause of Palestine, our friendship with Israel, and Israel does understand it. It is not that they don't understand India's position, because this is the position that India has maintained all through.
Sir, talking about these resolutions, I would like to bring a picture in front of you. That in October 26 resolution, there were 120 countries voted in favor, 14 opposed, and 45 remained in abstention. Whereas in this resolution, there were 153 countries voted in favor, only 23 remained in abstention, and opposition also shrunk from 14 to 10. So how do you see that this resolution occupies the spotlight more than the October 26 resolution?
This is exactly the thing that gradually the international community is realizing that enough is enough, that it is completely distraught at its own or the multilateral institutions' inability to do anything, international community to respond effectively to the crisis that is happening. Plus, this crisis also has possibility of expanding into the different areas. Now, as you know, that this means clearly that President Biden himself has told Prime Minister Netanyahu that you are making people go against you. Basically, the international community's support is reducing for Israel. Earlier that was there, which is clearly shown in numbers as well. So I think that In my view, I think certain deadlines have been given by the Americans to the Israeli leadership that within a week or so they have to stop it. Otherwise, the next UN Security Council resolution, I doubt that the Americans will be able to veto it again.
Anywhere it happens, war is a war, invasion is an invasion. But as per the reports that have been coming in, this Tuesday's resolution garnered more majority than the resolution which was supported against the invasion of Ukraine. So why is this stand? What do you think that this resolution garnered more majority than that resolution?
The thing is that one, there is Russia, which is a very big country, which has an important relationships across the world, especially in the global south. Plus, in that particular resolution, a particular case, if you come to think of it, a large number of countries, even though did not approve of the Russian invasion, which they called as a special operations into Ukraine, they appreciated the fact that Russia was actually forced into doing this because of the geopolitics and the American and the Western stance against the Russians. So therefore, there was not such a great support for them. Even those which condemned the attack refused to follow the sanctions. A large number of Middle Eastern countries, African countries are over there. India also abstained in that one and has continued 14 times. We abstained on any resolution pertaining to this because the national interest was also supreme. In this case, secondly, if you come to think of it, whatever figures which are available of casualties and destruction and death, in 2 years, you have much less than what has happened here in 2 months in a very small territory. Ukraine is the second largest country in Europe after Russia. So you can imagine that the kind of expanse we are talking about. And here it is barely 360 kilometers, a small piece of land on which the carpet bombing has been going on from October 9th. So I think that this is why today I was at the Doha Forum recently and I heard there nearly every single leader who came there, including the UN Secretary General, were narrating the kind of horror stories of the people, the Palestinians' plight. Of course, the terror attacks or terrorist or extremist attacks have to be condemned wherever they happen. And I think that the international community had broadly, fully supported Israel's right to defend. But right to defend and carpet bombing continued sort of thing, those are not really acceptable and don't fall within the ambit of the international humanitarian law. And therefore, Israel, we have seen, is on the warning at the moment from international community. As you know, the UNGA resolutions don't have the enforcing authority or enforcement. It is more of a moral kind of a standard that is set in this. It is the United Nations Security Council resolution. And the last one was only last week. United States had vetoed. And I think that the other countries, and which was, of course, in a very rare manner, was proposed by the UN Secretary General himself under Article 99 of the UN Charter. So I think that this was a very important, very unique initiative to stop the war. And now the world is for stopping the war.
So while talking about the resolution, on Tuesday itself, there were 2 more amendments that have been brought in, which was brought by Austria and the US respectively. Although they have garnered more yes than no, but they have not been adopted. Could you tell us why have they not been adopted and what brought both the countries to bring this amendment?
This was basically, again, trying to put that condemnation of the terror attacks. Now, October 7th, and we are now today, on December and 14th, you can imagine 68 days have gone by. Now there were about 1,100, 1,200 innocent Israelis suffered in this war and were killed. People were taken. And today, as you know, that there were 100 odd hostages have been released, but there are still about 140 which are from various countries because the Jews have Israeli citizenship, but they come from the different origins. And so every country also wants their people out as soon as possible. But in this one, basically, again, the United States and Austria wanted to bring in the same dimension about the thing. And I think that most of the countries there did not agree to it. And that's why it was not adopted.
Sir, thank you so much.
You were listening to a discussion on India's vote for ceasefire in Gaza. The participants were Anil Trigunayath, former diplomat, and Bala Nagendran D, Akashvani correspondent. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official.